Hi, I'm DuEwa Frazier, and you're listening to episode 54 of Nerdacity Podcast. Today, my guest is E.J. Antonio. E.J. received fellowships in poetry from the New York Foundation for the Arts, the Hurston Wright Foundation, and the Cave Canem Foundation. She's appeared as a featured reader and performer at venues in the New York State area, including Arts Westchester, The Stone, the Hobart Festival of Women Writers, the Vision Festival, Langston Hughes House, the Blue Door Art Gallery, the Untermyer Park Arts Center, and the David Rockefeller Creative Arts Center at the Pocantico Center. E.J.'s work has been published in various journals, magazines, and anthologies, including the Encyclopedia Project, African Voices Literary Magazine, Black Renaissance Noire, The Mom Egg, Killens Review of Arts and Letters, Taint 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 Magazine, About Place Journal, and Arriving at a Shoreline, an anthology. E.J. is the author of 2 chapbooks, Every Child Knows, Premier Poets Chapbook Series 2007, and Solstice, Red Glass Books 2013, and a solo jazz poetry CD, Rituals in the Marrow, Recipe for a Jam Session. E.J. is a founding board member of the nonprofit arts organization One Breath Rising, and she is also a founding member of the improvisation group, the Jazz and Poetry Choir Collective, which released its debut CD, We Were Here, in April 2020. I hope you enjoy this episode. Greetings, E.J.
Greetings, DuEwa. How you doing?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
I'm doing fine. So glad to be with you here today.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on Nerdacity Podcast. And of course, we are celebrating National Poetry Month.
Yes, we are. Yes, so we are.
It is so fitting that you're here. And I think of you as a longtime poetry friend. And I'm so proud of all of your work. And not only are you a terrific poet, but you support the work and activity of other poets in the community. And so I want to say thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. I try to support people that, support other poets because it's really important. Art is important. So anytime I can come out and support the other writers that I know or the other visual artists that I know or, my musical artist friends, it's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure.
Yes, indeed. And I want to congratulate you. You had a recent Poetry and Conversation event with Patricia Spears Jones, the new New York State poet, and also Peter Covino. And this was with the Hudson Valley Writers Center. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Wow.
I've known Patricia many years now. She's part of my Brooklyn poetry crew.
Exactly. I love Patricia.
And she's wonderful. She really is wonderful. And I had the pleasure of having her as an instructor for one of the Cave Canem regional workshops here in the city.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And she's a wonderful, giving teacher of poetry. Really wonderful. And so I was really I was really like, oh my, when she called me and said, I want you to come read with me at Hudson Valley Writers Center.
That's amazing. So can you talk with me about that event? What was it? What was the, I picture it being a very beautiful area. Was the weather nice? And, just everything about it.
We had fabulous weather. It was like 75 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And the Hudson Valley Writers Center is located in an old Metro North train station. So it actually overlooks the Hudson River.
Oh, wow.
We had a lovely crowd of audience that came that day. And we did a lovely reading. And it was really nice. We were 3 different voices but still connected. And
Yes.
it was my first time to meet Peter. He came down from Rhode Island, and I was like, "Oh, you came from Rhode Island? Wow!"
Yeah. I mean, because this was just, right there in the beginning, near the beginning of National Poetry Month. So it's a great time for it.
Yes, but it was really a wonderful reading. We had the Hudson Valley Writer Center is not a big place. It's very intimate space. So there's definitely, you have this conversation going on between you and the audience. And afterward, the audience mingles, they talk to us and we talk to them. And, it was a really lovely afternoon.
Oh, sounds like it. And, EJ, I'd love to get into your history as a poet and how you came to be and choose this path, because you're not only a poet, I consider you a jazz artist. You work with music quite a bit. And so please discuss, take us from your beginnings into your work with not only creating on the page, but working with music as well.
Well, I've always been a writer from a very young age. I used to try to write little short stories. By the time I got to high school, I was journaling. We had an English teacher who asked us to keep a journal every day. You had to turn it in at the end of the week. And I actually found my journal while I was cleaning out some things. And I noted that most of the comments that the teacher had was on my poetry. So I've always been attracted to the poem.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
I stopped writing right around the time I got out of college because, you go into the workforce, you get married, you have family,
Mm-hmm.
And then much about 24 years ago, I picked up my pen to write something and poetry came out. And that's what comes out even to this day.
Wow.
So
sure.
I've always been writing, and for a while at the beginning, I was a little leery of showing anybody any work, but one day I screwed up my courage and I took a writing workshop at Westchester Community College.
Mm-hmm.
And the instructor was Lisa Rhodes. And she was so encouraging of my work. She was the one that told me of the existence of Cave Canem.
Oh, wow.
She was the one that told me of at the time, Sarah Lawrence College used to run a week-long writing retreat.
Mm-hmm.
And she encouraged me to apply to these different things. And so I did. And I made it into Sarah Lawrence.
Oh, wow. That's retreat. Wonderful. Uh-huh.
And I was writing, doing the poetry in the workshop. And it was a very diverse participants in this particular workshop. And it was run by Stephen Dobbins. Most people, I think, know him for his mystery writing.
Oh,
but he also taught poetry at Sarah Lawrence. And when we would take a break, we would all go different places and sit down for about a half hour, and then we'd come back, And one day, one of the other participants, an elderly gentleman, walked up to me and he said, "Do you know what we're doing when we go on break?" And I was like, "Drinking coffee," because that's usually what they did. And he said, "Yes, we're drinking coffee, but we're also discussing your work."
Wow.
And he said to me, "No matter what you do, I want you to keep writing."
Mm.
And I looked at him and I said, "Okay." And I just, keep on and I keep on and I keep on. The first fellowship that I got was from Hurston Wright Foundation. And
yes.
It was the year that Tyemba Jess was the instructor for that.
Oh, that's amazing. Yes, of course. Nerdacity has interviewed Tyemba Jess. the
Yes.
Pulitzer Prize winning poet.
Yes. So, and I went there, and then I kept trying and I kept trying. I finally got into Cave Canem at the retreat to become a fellow.
Sure.
And while I was in my 3-year period to graduate from Cave Canem, I won in 2009. I won a NYFA award, New York Foundation of the Arts grant.
Oh, wow. Yes, congratulations. I saw that.
Yeah. So, and
that's huge, by the way, because that is highly competitive. And there, it's so crazy.
I found that out. I did not realize. I think the year that I was picked, it was like almost 2,000 applicants.
EJ, there used to be, people used to talk about that NYFA and say, oh, you'll only get in if one of the so-and-so, you got to know so-and-so. And it was just, probably just rumors. But I knew how coveted that NYFA grant was. And so that's amazing that you received that. And it's a testament to how great your work is and how talented you are.
Oh, thank you. But and by that time I had been working. I have to thank my Brooklyn poetry crew, because when I went to Sarah Lawrence, I had never read in front of anybody or anything like that. And Sarah Lawrence people encouraged me to get up and read. One of them signed me up for the open mic. And I got up and I read. And he used to run a reading series in Brooklyn. And he said to me, I want you to come to Brooklyn. He gave me the address. And I was like, yeah, okay. 6 months later, in the dead of winter, I go to Brooklyn, and that group of people at that open mic became my first poetry family.
Oh, wow.
And they always encouraged me. And it was.
Can you say who they are? Can you say who?
Some of them you might know.
I know some of them.
Joanne McFarland.
Oh, okay.
Was one of them. Janet Kaplan. Les Lopes. Bill Koffel, and a whole array of really talented people who were writing really good poetry, and at that time.
Sure.
They all kept encouraging me. And Les, who was running the reading series, he said, every time you read, it sounds like you're singing.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. And he was the first one. He knew of a musician by the name of Mark Taylor, who played jazz French horn at the time. He said, I'm going to set up something so that you and Mark can do something together. And he set up a reading for me and a gig for Mark at this place called, I think it was called the Spoken Word Cafe on Union Avenue in Brooklyn.
Sure.
And that was the first time that I ever worked with a musician. And I got up and I started to read, and they started to play, because he had like a quintet.
Oh, okay. So he had a full band.
He had a full band. And he started playing. I started doing the poem that I was doing. And about one stanza in, it clicked. And I was improvising, and he was responding to what I was doing.
Oh,
and the group,
okay.
And it was just this organic thing that happened.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, I think I like this.
And so you were definitely hooked, right? And it felt like this was meant to be.
It was meant to be. And,
okay.
and Mark Taylor was the first one to take me into a studio, because he was recording a CD, and I had written a poem called At What Age? And he took the poem and he wrote a composition for it. And he took me into the studio to record it. and we recorded it. And I went into the sound booth where the tech was, and there was something playing, and I was like, wow, that's really good. Oh, wow, I wonder what station he's playing. And the tech looked at me and he goes, you never heard your voice recorded, have you? And I go,
oh,
no.
so you were listening to the recording,
I was
to the
listening
playback,
to me,
and you're
and
like, hey, who is
me.
that? Sounding like, Ella or Billie Holiday or somebody with, poetry and music.
So, and in the long, it took Mark a while to finally put the CD out, but when he did, he asked me to come and read the poem, and he was doing a gig at Cornelia Street Cafe.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I want you to come and read the poem, because it's on the CD or whatever. Unbeknownst to me, he took the poem, the recording of the poem with him and his wife to Canada to visit her relatives. And he was playing it for people in Canada.
Wow. So you were really going worldwide at that point.
Right. And I didn't even know it, But
right.
I went to Cornelia Cafe to do the reading to read the poem for him, as part of his CD release. And that's where I learned that he named the CD after my poem.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful.
And, from there, it just went on. When I won the NYFA, the first thing I knew I wanted to do was to record a CD, a jazzoetry CD.
Right.
And I was taking classes at the Jazz Museum in Harlem.
Mm-hmm.
And Christian McBride was one of the instructors for that workshop that I was taking.
Oh, okay.
And this was right after I won the NYFA, and I said, I'm gonna do this. and I was a little nervous, but I walked up to Christian and I said, would you be on my CD?
Oh, wow.
Like, sure, baby. When?
When? Yeah, it was just a matter of when.
It was a when. And the CD came together. I worked with some musicians that I had gotten, used to working with from Cornelia Street Cafe days. And we went into the studio and we just, did this CD. I wanted it to sound as though we were at the club. Mm-hmm. The after party after the club.
Oh, the after party after
the after jam
after the
that
club.
they do. And and that's what it sounds like. We didn't do any augmentation on the sound or anything. We just did it straight. And the CD was fairly well accepted. It got some nice reviews back then, and
oh wow, that's great.
And that was my coming out as a poet, and I call myself a jazz poet. Some people feel that that's a limiting title, but I call myself that because my concept of who I am as a poet comes from all the musicians that I worked with. Mm-hmm. When they work with me, they consider me to be as much musician as they are.
As they are, exactly. You're doing the vocals.
Okay.
You're the voice.
And they can look at the work. They can look at the work on paper, and they can see where the music is supposed to come in. Just from the words. One of them explained to me that I actually kind of write as if I were writing a jazz composition. Mm.
So you know this work so well, and they're telling you that, hey, you are composing,
Right.
That's wonderful.
And so I'm like, oh, okay. And then I had the really good fortune to work with Luis Reyes Rivera from Brooklyn.
Oh yes,
for many years.
He was one of my teachers, E.J. I used to take workshops with him at Sister's Place in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm.
And my meeting with him was, I met him through one of my contacts at Cave Canem, who kept saying to me, you've got to come out to Sister's Place to meet Louis. You've got to come out to Sister's Place.
I'm telling you.
And I went out there, and he was doing a workshop, and someone had written a poem, and the workshop was discussing it. And when I said, can I say something? And he said, oh, yeah, sure. And so I started critiquing this person's poem. And he was looking at me, And then when the workshop was over, and you know how long his workshops went.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When the workshop was over, he came over to me, he leaned across the table, and he said to me, "You must have some poetry that I'm supposed to be reading."
Wow.
And I'm looking at him like, what? he said it again. "You must have some poetry that I'm supposed to be reading because you just walked in here and critiqued that poem like it was nobody's business."
Wow.
Okay. And that's how I started going to Lewis. And I must have gone there for almost 5 years, going to Sister's Place every Saturday.
Yes.
To gather up and soak up as much knowledge as I could.
I'm telling you, because he was giving it out and giving it freely.
And giving it out.
Yeah.
And so I, and he was the one that said to me, he heard me sing one time because someone in the workshop didn't know what the spiritual steal away sounded like. And so I sang it for them, for the person, and everybody stopped, and he's looking at me, and then he walks over to me and goes, "You don't know what you have, do you?"
Wow. It's almost like there's a thread, there's a pattern here with this theme. You don't know what you have. It's almost like what the musicians were saying to you.
Right. And you know what I figured out after these 24 years, it's like that first 10 years was like a light speed jump. I met the people that I met. If I hadn't met one of them, things would not go as they had went.
Sure. I know
and,
what you mean. Yeah.
And I went, and it was just like this light speed. Like all of a sudden I was doing a workshop with Quincy True at his house,
Wow.
And then it was almost as if it was like, why, how am I meeting all of these people?
Because it was meant to be. You were just being moved and positioned in the places you were supposed to be in.
And
right.
So, and that's how I look at my career. I'm always trying to learn something, to do something different, to see how far I could take it. I also, for the last, from 2009 till about 2019, when the pandemic started, I had started singing with a chorus up here in Westchester.
Oh, okay.
And the instructor, she was also a poet. And how I met her was I was doing a reading at the Greenburgh Town Hall. And she came up to me and she wanted to know if I could, and I sang something during in one of the poems. And she wanted to know if I thought I could sing "Oh Freedom" with her chorus. So I said yes. And when after the show and everything was over, I did it and everything. She kept me in the chorus. And I couldn't read music, dude. I had no clue. I could not read music. And she was doing Bach, and she was doing Broadway, and she was doing.
Oh wow. Okay, but you were supposed to be there.
But I was supposed to be there because you know what happened? She kept after me, and she kept after me, and she kept after me, and she said, "I'm going to give you a solo, but I want you to come here, and we are going to work on your voice and get you ready to do this solo."
Wow, that's amazing.
And I started doing.
How did you feel about that?
I was kind of like, "You're going to give me a solo?" Really?
Who, me?
Me? Really? And she worked with me for, I think I took lessons with her every Saturday for almost 8 years. And she really helped me to find the range of my voice. And it was a classical voice training that she was giving me.
Sure.
And because of her, I started being like the cantor at my church for a good while.
Sure.
And, and then I always liked to sing when I was doing my poetry. And that just added another depth to it. So it's like all of these things happened. And it helps to build me as a writer.
Sure.
And a performer.
And it certainly sounds as if all along the way your community was building as well.
Oh yes, I have
From so many,
so many poetry circles. Patricia Smith.
right.
I had a workshop with Patricia Smith
Oh, yes.
up at Hudson Valley Writer Center, and I think a little bit of a workshop with her through Cave Canem. And they were getting ready to do a reading, and I wasn't in the workshop, but I walked into the room, and people from my Brooklyn group was there, and people from Cave Canem was there, and I had so many groups.
So it was like all your family, all of your various poetry family was there.
Poetry families were there. My Cornelia Street family, because I even started going to the Pink Pony readings at Cornelia Street.
That makes me think about Golda Solomon.
And Golda and everybody.
Yeah.
And Patricia goes, yeah, leave it to EJ to know 75% of the people in the room. And when I thought about it, I was like, oh, I did, didn't I?
That's right. Wow, that's amazing.
I've met so many wonderful poets throughout my journey, and I met them before they started winning awards and, leaving New York to go teach and do all of these things, and it's just really, and it's an enriching experience to hang with the poets.
I'm sure.
It really is. So, but that's been that's really been my poetry career. I'm still writing. And now I'm part of a group called the Jazz and Poetry Choir Collective.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Can you discuss that and when you started? And what kind of we started in about 2011, 12, and it was the brainchild of Golda Solomon because she wanted to see if she could try to recreate. There used to be a Brooklyn poetry chorus that she used to know about, and I think she participated in it a couple of times. And it doesn't exist anymore, but she wanted to create some kind of a choir chorus of poetry and the music. So I'm one of the founding members. Golda's a founding member. Actually, most of our musicians actually write poetry. So our goal is to create a synergy between the word and the sound. Sure.
And we do it through improvisation. Now, we all write our own stuff, but when we get up to do our stuff, you're not necessarily going to be hearing it the way it is on the page, because it's whatever moves you, whatever phrasing in it moves you. The music can move you. And so it's this real, we try to make this as a real high level synergetic collaboration.
Oh, wow. That sounds wonderful. And through the Jazz and Poetry Choir Collective, you have released a CD titled We Were Here.
Yes. That brainchild, we've been together so long that I said, we really need to get into a studio and record, because it's not like we're going to get a book, because that's not what our thing is.
Sure.
So we need to record something. So we went into a studio in September of 2019, and there were 8 of us. We went in, we recorded everyone's poems. We did the music, we did everything, and the CD actually came out in 2020, but of course we're in the middle of the pandemic, so we didn't have we didn't have a release party or anything like that. But you
might have done an online event, right? Virtual, maybe.
Yeah, we were thinking about doing that. At the time, though, they hadn't really worked out the kinks of doing the live music.
Sure,
right. From different locations. But since then, we've done. Since then, unfortunately, we lost one of our former members last year,
Oh, I'm sorry to
And
hear that.
yeah, and he wasn't really, he had left the group, but when we decided to go into the studio, I kind of insisted that he be included.
Sure.
And so we have his poems on the CD.
Oh, wow. So his legacy will live on because you have the recording.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, we have that. And we continue to go along. As a matter of fact, over the, in October last year, we were one of the first groups to perform at the Rockefeller Performing Arts Center in Pocantico.
Oh, wow, that's wonderful. Okay. Oh, that's wonderful.
Yes, and that was a really wonderful event for us. We've done things at the Westchester Arts Center up in White Plains. We've done many different things. For many times, we performed at the Baha'i Center in the city. Before the pandemic started. And we're doing different things. We just, as a matter of fact, we just did a gig at Untermyer Gardens up in Yonkers this past Sunday.
Oh, wow. E.J., you really stay busy with your poetry, arts, and music. That's amazing.
Oh, yeah. So, so the group is going along good. And then, of course, I'm one of the founding board members of One Breath Rising.
Oh, yes. I wanted to ask you about that next. One Breath Rising is wonderful, nonprofit arts organization, and you're a founding board member. So yes, please, let's discuss that, E.J., because you're involved with bringing on so many poets and I think even musicians. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
In 2014, my poet friend, Daryl Allardyce, who left us in 2020, unfortunately.
Yes, may he rest. A wonderful poet, by the way.
Poet, and a wonderful, wonderful person. He was like my brother.
Yes.
And he called me and he said, "Listen, E.J., I'm Joy, that's his wife. Joy and I think about starting this group, this organization. I want you to come on and be with us." And we took about a year figuring out what the name was going to be, what the mission was going to be, how we were going to do it, and we got it off the ground. Our first actual event that we put on was with Tyemba Jess was the featured poet.
Oh, okay. And that would have been in person. So
that
when
was
you
in
started, this was in person.
It was
series.
In person, and it was at the South Oxford Space in Brooklyn.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And we had a musical group, and it went off very well. It was really wonderful, and we kept doing it. And then Daryl spied a art gallery in Park Slope, the 440 Art Gallery.
Oh, okay.
And he went in. And he was talking to people and whatever. And next thing we knew, he had a monthly reading series going.
Yes. That exactly, because I remember when Daryl was hosting, I want to say a Zora's Place or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
The next thing we knew, he had a monthly reading series going at the 440 Gallery under the One Breath auspices.
Oh, I see. Right.
And he and I were the ones programming the readers.
The reading, okay.
And it was but we had a really great run at the 440 Gallery. It was a small gallery. It was an intimate space, and we just had people, want to come in and listen to the poetry. And then we would have musicians come and do a solo gig of their work, And the concept for One Breath Rising, because we were musically oriented, is that the reader gets the musician, they get to do a set worth of their work. So a set usually runs about 40, 45 minutes.
Sure.
And we made it part of our mission that we would not ask anybody to come and read or perform and not pay them something.
Wow. And that's wonderful, because oftentimes, poets are asked to read, and there isn't, really a mention of, hey, let's, provide the poet an honorarium or whatever we can do. So I appreciate One Breath Rising does that, and there are a number, even the Brownstone Poets Collective with Patty Kerrigan, and so many others do provide that support.
Yes, and so and we have stuck to it. And to tell you the truth, our 10th year. We're in our 10th year of existence, but our 10th year for putting on events is going to be 2025.
Really?
We've been around that long.
Oh my gosh. Let's give One Breath Rising a round of applause.
And we tried to stick with that mandate and knock on wood that we have been able to do that. We've been able to pay something to the performers.
That's right. And it's amazing and so appreciated. And One Breath Rising, now, when I was on with you all, it was virtual. And I guess that was, very early with, post-pandemic and all of that. So are you all in person now too?
Okay, so what we do, we're still doing the literary part online, and which really opens us up to be able to invite poets from around the country,
from all over,
all over. Because I knew so many poets. We were blessed. I've had Frank X. Walker. I've had Ramika Bingham.
Appalachian poet.
Yes, I've had Ramika Bingham. I've had Willie Perdomo.
Oh, right.
We had Cheryl Boyce Taylor. We had so many. We've had so many poets that don't live in the city be able to participate. And read for us, and and have
really
wonderful readings.
Sure.
And since Daryl had passed, in 2020, I host the online literary part of the program. We are, however, doing live for our music programming.
I saw that. I was going to ask you about that too. That's coming up next month. Is that correct?
Yes, next month. We're going to have Sako Yasuma, and she's going to do her project for us, her musical project for us at the Soapbox Gallery in Brooklyn. And we've been having really good events at Soapbox and the Brooklyn Conservatory of Music. So, we're really trying to do some things. And usually, we didn't do it this year, but last year, I worked with the J. Rodriguez Trio.
Oh, okay.
We did a live, and the poet Robert Gibbons, and we did a live jazzoetry jazz event at Soapbox.
Oh, yes. Oh, that's wonderful.
So we do try to do that. We try to bring in the jazz and the music and the word in the live performances, some of the live performances.
And that makes it nice for the audience, kind of mixing it up and giving something for everyone.
Yes. Yes.
And so, E.J., I know that you're also the author of 2 chapbooks, Every Child Knows, Premier Poets Chapbook Series, and Solstice, published by Red Glass Books.
Yes.
And do you have, I know that you're always reading all of the time. Do you have other works that are in progress? I know you're always working on new things.
I am. As a matter of fact, I just finished for those that don't know, in April, because it's National Poetry Month, and it happens to be it'd be Jazz Appreciation Month.
Oh, wow.
Usually what happens is poets get together in groups and they write a poem every day for each day of April.
Is that, what is it, 30 for 30?
That's what the 30-30 means.
30-30, right.
Okay. So we just finished, the group that I write with, we did a modified 30-30 this year. And so I'm going to read one of those poems, you know, a little later to see how the writing goes. But my newest thing is, One Breath Rising had the musician Michael Wimberly perform for us in 2020. And he gave us some little brief history of different instruments that he owns.
Sure.
And he was saying that sometimes we think of a particular instrument as being created in Europe, but the instrument is really created, you know, in either South America or Africa, or, you know, the version of it, and then it morphs into whatever it becomes in the classical orchestra. And it got me to thinking, and I sat down and I wrote a poem called Origin. And it's one of my longer poems. And I was reading for one of Golda's shows, and I did the poem with the bass player Christopher Dean Sullivan. And everybody really, he didn't know anything about the poem. He never read it. And this was the first time I was reading it in public. And it just gelled, you know? And and I kept thinking about it. And I said, you know, I really need to record this. So I'm giving some serious thought. I started some wheels moving, but I'm thinking I'm going to go back into the studio.
Go back into the studio, right? And then, you know, EJ, how do you decide which ones, like, okay, these I'm going to send off for publication, these I'm going to save for a new CD? Is there a distinction that you make between them?
I make a distinction between them. There are some poems that I've written. And first of all, let me say this. I don't believe that there is any type of a poem that you can't do to music.
Sure.
But sometimes the quieter ones lend themselves more to somebody reading, to sitting down and reading them. And so I know when I'm writing something that's going to be collaborating with the music, because how I write it, how I format it on the page is different.
Yes.
I'll be leaving spaces. I'll be leaving room, you know, there might be room in between words, you know. The line breaks might not be what people would consider to be a normal line break.
Sure.
Okay. And then there are other pieces that I write where the line breaks are more along the lines of what people would expect to see for a poem. And those I usually say, okay, well, let me see now. I think I'll send this in, you know, if an anthology or somebody's looking for work or whatever, you know, I'll look through the poems and decide which ones I think will go nicely on the page for that type of thing.
Yes.
Published. And I don't really worry about it so much for the poems that I know I'm going to be reading with the music. You know, because those are organic.
Oh, I see.
They're organic to the point that even though I've written them down, it's mainly I've written them down because I do not have a great memory.
Okay.
So I'm not an off-page poet because I usually don't remember what I wrote, but even when after I've written it, if I'm looking at it or whatever, I'm still improvising within it. So it's still not exactly what I wrote.
Right. I understand. You've made it it's a new, you know, if we think of our poems as children, it's like a new child. This is a rebirth of the poem or revision, you know.
Exactly.
You're going to do something new with it. It still has the same foundation, but it'll have, you know, you might tweak something here or add
you know,
something else or do some
or
repetition.
whatever.
Right.
Exactly. So,
That,
so that's how that's how it works out for me. Now, for other poets, it works. It'll probably be a whole different process for them, how they decide which ones to send to print and which ones they want to do with music. And then a lot of poets don't do their poetry to music because some people don't hear. They hear one or the other. They don't hear both together.
sure.
Which is amazing to me because, as the singer Faye Victor said, our everything is sound. Our alphabet is sound. So I don't know how the brain separates what's written from the sound of it.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So, but that's my perspective on that.
No, that's wonderful. And it really does, I think, help the listener, for those who will listen to this interview, really see your process and understand, how you go about, working with music from first, writing and then to later recording, kind of just that transition.
Yeah, it's an interesting. It's a very interesting transition. And the first time I ever went into a studio and it was like, oh, that's how that works. Oh, okay. And so,
Yeah.
It's an interesting endeavor to do it, to try to do it. I feel like everybody should try to do that at least once so they can get that experience. I'm a firm believer in no experience is ever wasted. I was a graduate of the High School of Music and Art as an art major when it was on the campus of City College.
Oh, a City College. Okay.
Okay.
Wow.
That high school used to be right on 135th Street and Convent Avenue, which is dead in the middle of City College.
That is right. That's the whole CUNY, City College campus there.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And I'm not even gonna tell you how many. And then when I was during my work career, I took photography at FIT as a continuing ed student.
Oh, wow.
The eye that I had developed as a student of art, a visual artist, played into the visual art of the photography.
Wow. So you really have been involved with so many aspects of art.
Yes. And the visual art worked its way into my poems. So I'm a firm believer. Nothing that you have learned
is ever wasted.
It just comes out in different ways.
Thank you for that, EJ. That's a lesson that we can all absorb and remember, especially when we think, hey, I wasted time doing this or that, or what was that for?
You didn't waste it. It's not wasted. You're storing that information. It's part of your cellular being. And you just don't know when what you learned is going to be needed.
So true. And so EJ.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't want to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, you really have warmed us up to hear, your poetry. So please, wherever you want to start, this is just so wonderful. We're celebrating National Poetry Month, and we have a master poet here, E.J. Antonio. Well, a master poet and a jazz artist with us.
So I'm going to start off with one of the poems that is on my CD, which is called Rituals in the Marrow, Recipe for a Jam Session. And I know that it's on Spotify because my son-in-law he looked it up and it came right up.
Oh,
And sometimes
okay.
when I'm in his car, we're going in his car, all of a sudden one of my tracks will pop up.
Oh, wow. I guess he said, let me check this out and see, can we get this on Spotify? Look, you something. You are a star. If your music is on Spotify, you're with the current, you're with the generations of music listeners who only do streaming. Like right? So like, there are people that only listen to streaming music now.
Right. That's right.
So, you can get that in the car or anywhere,
So I'm going to read one of the poems that was on that CD.
Okay.
It's called Every Old New York Jazz Club. And it was inspired by my first time ever going to the jazz club Iridium down on Broadway in the 50s. Mm-hmm. Every old New York jazz club smells like every other old New York jazz club. Even the new ones try for that old jazz club aroma. Floors marinated in aged liquor bring the same rhythms. The same set change equals the next set change equals high fives and waves and down with it fist knocks as the early musicians pass the scene. The next headliners bring in the Afro-Cuban sound and a grounding takes over. Where reed and piano once reigned, a leader calls for the next song. A master drummer's body and soul plays Love You like yesterday's radio news. And I wonder if old musicians' wives know their old musicians are stepping out on them. The scent of morning bluebells dipped in dark chocolate orange spirits, their woman a chord, orgasmic waves of pulp and syrup, blindsided by the curves of a treble clef, swaying like calla lilies in a waterless ocean. They are drones, busy working her sweet into the buzz of slow gin, Merlot, Corona, crowds chasing the myth created by every old musician in every old New York jazz club. A djembe goddess, her hips slicing through water and air to pick the bone clean.
Wow. How beautiful. And I'm telling you, I can hear the saxophone and the drums, and I can hear all of that going off, and I can see you on the stage just creating that vibration, for an audience with that poem. That's beautiful. And please tell the title of that poem again, EJ.
It's called Every Old New York Jazz Club.
Every old, and you mentioned Iridium, and I know that was that's not open anymore, right?
I don't believe that it
Iridium
opened back up after the pandemic.
Okay, did they used to call it?
Anybody going there, but you never know. Sometimes they might open up in a different location.
Right. Did they used to call it the Iridium Club?
Yeah.
Or was it? Okay, I just vaguely kind of remember
you had to go
downstairs
to go into it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Wow. Well, that was definitely a jazz club.
And I was unique. I would get the table. They would sit me. I would sit up near the front, and then I pull out my pad, and they'd be playing, and I'd be writing poetry.
Oh, wow.
But I think they might have thought I was a music reviewer or something.
Okay, because they were probably like, "Why is she taking notes?"
Right. They didn't know I realized I was writing poems.
But you were writing, exactly.
I was writing.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, EJ. So what can we hear next?
So I have a whole series of poems about a washerwoman by the name of Esther. Mm-hmm. And the story of her life is being told by the clothes in her closet.
Oh.
And so this poem is called Tangerine Moon, as told by the red dress. Mm-hmm. There is something to be said about how the tangerine moon's soft light casts hard-edged shadows across Esther's worries. Her son in an army someplace in the world she'll never see. How a landmine rips the body to nothing. How the surviving mind becomes more twisted than the Jeep caught in its blast center. She tries hard to brush away the paint flakes clinging to her son's freshly polished boots placed on the windowsill. In the pale light, the moon interrupts the painful twinges of fear, then wraps her in the soothing glow of old things. Her great-grandmama's spineless Bible passed hand to hand at Sunday service. Her grandmama's 3 times mended quilt. Her mama's recording of Mahalia's prayerful, "Come Sunday, oh, come Sunday." The repetitious music of her bleach-worn curtains brushing against the window. Yes, there is something to be said about all these loose ends of living, but she stands silent in the same exactness, month after month, spooning the moon into her mouth.
Wow. Loose ends of living. I mean, that can be applied to today or just, the pandemic. Spooning the moon. This poem gives so much imagery and just so many layers of the characterization you're giving of this woman is wonderful.
Yeah, it's a project that, you know how you look and you say, oh, I have a found poem.
Mm-hmm.
This whole series of poems was started by a writing prompt that Cheryl Boyce Taylor gave when she had a little workshop going and I was a participant. And she gave the prompt, write a poem about a washerwoman.
Mm.
There were 5 of us in the workshop.
Mm-hmm.
And I went home and the next week I had 3 poems.
Wow.
About this washerwoman.
Mm-hmm.
And her clothes. She had a red dress. She has the black dress.
The red dress. Mm-hmm.
She has the blue dress. She has the brown dress that she uses when she goes to church to clean.
Sure. She's got a dress for every occasion.
She's got clothes, right, for every occasion.
Mm-hmm.
And she's basically a single mother raising her son
mm-hmm.
in a rural town.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, the work really tries to tell about her life in this town.
Mm-hmm.
And how she herself had dreams.
Sure.
But she wasn't able to get out to do those dreams until much later in her life.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting, I really like these poems because they really do. But I don't know where they come from. It's one of those things where the universe is handing you something.
Sure.
And so you just take it and you're the conduit to
mm-hmm.
get that out.
That's right. You're the instrument to move it on out.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. And E.J., would you happen to have one more you can share?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm going to read the one I wrote here for the last day of, one of the ones I wrote for the 30/30 this month.
Mm-hmm.
It's called The Leak and the Portrait. The slow, unseen drip, drip, drip in a closet, full of an old memory. A photo in a gold frame. A Black woman, my grandma, the Reverend, standing full height tall, proud in all her church finery flowing to the floor. A gown of gold beige red, flowing up to the sky, a red turban hat. And none of it, not the frame perfectly preserved, not the glass perfectly cut, not the gown, not the hat, not even her tawny brown skin could protect her from the drip, drip, drip of the roof's failure. The failure that changed her to the mottled bleeding colors of soft golds, blues, reds, beiges, greens, forming a soft, beautiful watercolor painting. This ghost of an image, damaged beyond saving, holds us captive. While I consider its beauty, my brother sees the loss. Declares to our mother, he will not throw our grandma away. We listen, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. As he leans it against the wall, our silence screams. None of us want to let her go again.
It's beautiful. And that could be, E.J., I hear so much storytelling also in your work. Could that be considered a prose poem?
It could be. It's not written as a prose poem. I do write a lot of prose poems.
Mm-hmm.
This one is not particular. This one is not written as a prose poem. I do tend to tell stories with my work.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of people have named me a griot.
I'm telling you, no, for sure.
A griot, because they say I take the history. I remember the past, and I try to bring it forward to the future.
That's right. So fitting.
Yeah. So I've been deemed a griot. And actually I did a reading at one of the places downtown, and there was a young man there, and I was kind of surprised because he was like an old soul.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked at me and he said, "You're a griot, and you have to keep telling the story."
Wow.
And I was, because I wasn't expecting him to say that, because, he really was this young soul. That was not something I expected him to say.
True. But you are, and you carry, when you were and I could hear it when you talk about bridging the history with, the bringing it forward to the present. And you talked about, wow, here I was in these spaces with these poets, Quincy Troop, and I was, doing this workshop, and I was in with all of these, renowned people, and knowing them before they became who they are. And it dawned on me that, and you mentioned this, well, you were supposed to be caught up because you were supposed to be with all of these leading poets, because you yourself are a leading poet. And because you work with music, that would very much make you a griot. You're working with jazz, and we know that just comes from African music forms anyway. And, the griot was often, not only were they like a verbal storyteller, they were a musician, they were a dancer, they were, they worked with all of the arts in telling, the stories of the past. So that's so fitting for you, E.J., for sure.
Oh, thank you.
And so please tell us, what are you excited about in terms of looking forward? What's coming up for you?
Well, I know the Jazz and Poetry Choir Collective, we're going to be part of the Westchester Jazz Fest in September. So that's coming up. Going to be up in White Plains. I'm pulling my things together now, budget, where I want to record at, who I want on the recording. I'm trying to pull all that information together. So I'm hopeful that I will be in the studio before the end of the year.
Okay. That's wonderful.
To record my origin work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still doing the programming for One Breath Rising, and working on the programming for the literary part. And so that's ongoing, and hosting the online reading series.
Sure. Oh, that's
So
wonderful.
I'm doing, and of course I'm writing, and I'm just doing what I'm doing. I'm retired.
That's right.
I'm retired from corporate America now.
Oh, okay. Well, oh wow! Congratulations.
Thank you.
Give you a round of applause.
So now I get to I get to focus on doing the things I need to do.
You get to do what you want.
Exactly.
And be the artist, and be that artist, that you envision yourself to be.
That's right.
All
the
time.
All the time. Because once you're an artist, you're always an artist. Most artists don't retire.
That is true.
You always will do your art. Mm-hmm. You will always do your art.
What a blessing. Kind of way.
Yeah, that's a blessing.
And so the next event is the Westchester.
Yes, that's the next event. My reading career is kind of interesting. It's like, it's like, famine, and then all of a sudden feast.
And that's funny.
Like, I might not have nothing today, but
for a while, right?
I was blessed in February to do a reading, to read a poem at a Black History Month event held at the Consulate of India.
Wow.
And that came out of nowhere.
Wow, that's awesome.
Okay. That was not anything that was pre-planned,
Sure.
I had done a reading a couple of years right before the pandemic happened out at Walt Whitman House in Long Island. Mm-hmm. And the woman there remembered me. They were looking for someone, and she put them in contact with me, and there I was.
And there you were.
And so right now it's looking like September is the next thing, but I never know. I never know.
Right. And of course you're working with One Breath Rising. So I know you're bringing, you're putting that on as well.
Right.
And is there a central place, E.J., where we can find your upcoming readings, any performances with your jazz group and things like that?
Okay. Well, I finally got an Instagram account.
Yay!
And my daughter helps me out with that, so I give her the things to post.
Okay.
And she puts
cool.
them in there for me. So I'm getting better at this,
Oh, that's awesome, because that's where it is. I mean, that's where everything is happening, with people posting and, their current news and photos and videos and things like that.
Right. So that's my new thing. I still have a Facebook account.
Okay.
But Facebook, I don't know.
and so for Facebook, because we want to make sure that everyone is following you and will be up to date with your new works.
Yes, on Facebook, I'm E.J. Antonio.
Okay.
Like, if just put my name in, I should come up. I think I'm the only E.J. Antonio on there.
Okay. Okay.
And on Instagram,
let
me see if I get this right.
Instagram.
I'm on there as E.J. Antonio Blues.
Okay.
But it's not an S at the end, it's a Z.
Okay. So just E.J. and Antonio. Blues.
BLUEZ.
Easy, not S.
Not
okay,
S.
So folks will catch that. I'm glad we spelled it out for them, so they know where to go. Okay.
So that's where I am, and I'm here. I'm working.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much, E.J. It's been a pleasure to chop it up with you, to catch up and find out about all things E.J. poetry and E.J. jazz poetry. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to be on Nerdacity today. And I look forward to everything that you're going to be doing in this season and in the future. We'll be sure to keep up to date with you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And it was wonderful speaking with you today about, about my history.
Oh, of course. You're welcome, E.J. Well, take care.
You too.
Okay. And you were just listening to episode 54 of Nerdacity Podcast, featuring poet, jazz vocalist, and jazz poet, E.J. Antonio. Visit her website at ejantonio.blues.net. That's blues, BLUEZ.net. I hope you'll check out Nerdacity Podcast on Instagram at Nerdacity Podcast. Also on X, formerly known as Twitter, at NerdacityPod1. You can also follow Nerdacity on Spotify and listen and subscribe to Nerdacity on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Podcast Addict, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and many more platforms, including YouTube.com/DuEwa World. Thanks so much for listening. Take care.